Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, as we learn from St. Augustine, Doctor of the Church, while we read his book, Confessions. Welcome, Catholic pilgrims, to another great day. Today we are going to hear about how St. Monica was told by St. Ambrose, who was the Bishop of Milan, to stop practicing a certain custom, and she is obedient. There's something really important about obedience that I want to talk about on the other side of our reading. We will be reading from Book 6, Chapter 2, on page 112. It had been my mother's custom in Africa to take meal cakes and bread and wine to the shrines of the saints on their memorial days. But the doorkeeper would not allow her to do this in Milan. When she learned that the bishop had forbidden it, she accepted his ruling with such pious submission that I was surprised to see how willingly she condemned her own practice rather than dispute his command. For her heart was not beset by a craving for wine, nor did the love of it goad her into hatred of the truth, as happens with so many men and women who are as disgusted to hear the praises of sobriety as drunkards to be offered water with their wine. She used to bring her basket full of the customary offerings of food, intending to taste a little and give the rest away. For herself, she never poured more than a small cupful of wine, watered it to suit her sober palate, and she drank only as much of it as was needed to do honor to the dead. If there were many shrines to be honored in this way, she carried the same cup around with her to each one and shared its contents, by now well watered and quite lukewarm, with any of her friends who were present, allowing each to take only the smallest sip. For her purpose was to perform an act of piety, not to seek pleasure for herself. But she willingly ceased this custom when she found that this great preacher, this holy bishop, had forbidden such ceremonies, even to those who performed them with sobriety, both for fear that to some they might be occasions for drunkenness, and also because they bore so close a resemblance to the superstitious rites which the pagans held in honor of their dead. Instead of her basket full of the fruits of the earth, she learned to bring to the shrines of the martyrs a heart full of prayers, far purer than any of these gifts. In this way, she was able to give what she could to the poor, and the communion of the Lord's body was celebrated at the shrines of the saints, who had given their lives and earned the crown of martyrdom by following the example of his passion. Yet it seems to me that my mother probably would not have given up this habit so readily if the prohibition had come from another whom she loved less dearly than Ambrose. My heart lies open before you, O Lord my God, and this is what I believe. Because he could show me the way of salvation, she was greatly devoted to Ambrose, and his heart too had warmed to her for her truly pious way of life, her zeal and good works, and her regular church-going. Often, when he saw me, he would break out in praise of her, congratulating me on having such a mother. But he little knew what sort of son she had, one who doubted all these things, and was convinced that man could not find the road leading to life. I've been reading a kid's biography on St. Ignatius of Loyola with my son for school, and St. Ignatius had a major conversion to the faith while waiting for a leg injury to heal up. Now, once he dedicated his life to God, he went really hard with the penances. He barely ate, barely slept, wore basically rags, and refused any kind of comfort, really. He was punishing himself so much that he was making himself sick and weak, and kind of a burden on people because he was so weak and he had to beg for whatever he needed when he didn't really need to do that. Now, some priests noticed this and told him that he needed to stop such severe penances because he was damaging his body to the point of not being able to do God's will for his life. It's not God's will that you become so weak and emaciated that you can't function. And at first, he was not obedient, and this was a problem. He did end up getting better about this, but it was too harsh, and that is not something that we have to follow to be holy. St. Faustina, too, was told on several occasions to stop certain practices, and the good news was that she was obedient right away. I was listening to Father Gregory Pine the other day. He's a Dominican, and he was talking about obedience to the Church and the Holy Father. Now, people get all up in arms about obedience to the Church, and I'm telling you, and because I am a prideful person, I can spot it when I see it, that this is always a pride issue. It is always a situation where someone has decided that their way is the right way. They are the authority. Except Jesus did not give them the keys. He didn't give me the keys. He didn't give you the keys. He gave them to St. Peter and his successors. There has never been a decree from the Holy Father where he is telling the faithful, the universal church, that they must do something bad. He has never once said that in order to be a faithful Catholic, you must actively do something which we know to be bad. Now, what he does sometimes do, and bishops do this too, is tell us to stop doing something or hold off. They want us to be passive. And the reasoning may not always make sense to us right away. And it may tick us off and it may anger us. But telling us to hold off from doing something versus telling us to actively do something that we know is wrong are not the same thing. If I told my son to actively go steal something, he would have every right to disobey me because stealing is wrong. However, if I told him not to buy something that he wanted right away, but just to hold off, he would need to obey me. Telling him to hold off unless it results in his starvation is not wrong. It's not sinful. Now, St. Monica has been practicing bringing food and wine to the shrines of saints on their feast days, and Bishop Ambrose is worried that this could lead some people into drunkenness because they drink the wine as they go. But he's also worried that this is too closely related to pagan practices of bringing gifts to the gods. So he tells her to stop doing it. And she does. She obeys. Now, St. Augustine says, well, some other bishop told her to do it. She might not have done it so readily, but because St. Ambrose was kind of the guy who was bringing St. Augustine along, she was willing to do it just like immediately. We don't really know if that's the truth because no other bishop told her to do that except St. Ambrose. But anyway, maybe this irritated her, or maybe it didn't. But regardless, she obeys and stops. Bishop Ambrose didn't tell her to go make a sacrifice of a pigeon to a saint because that would have been terrible. No, he just told her to stop doing something. Your salvation does not hinge on whether or not you bring gifts to shrines. It could possibly hinge on bringing gifts to idols or causing scandal for others. So we must be prudent. And just as a side note, bringing a few flowers to place at a statue is not wrong, so don't worry if you do that. But obedience requires humility. And if we refuse to stop doing something because we are embarrassed or because we think we know better or because we just like doing it and we've always done it, well, we are being prideful. No matter what the justification is, we are being prideful when we don't obey Christ's church and the Holy Father. Now, I know that is hard to hear sometimes, but the second that we say, well, I know better, we are no different than all the Protestant reformers and all the schismatics up and down the ages, and all the people who have said that they have a better way. So, obedience when it's easy, and obedience when it's hard. That is all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. I'll be back here soon with you, but until then, live the faith boldly, and travel well.